So today we are interviewing Mr. Leland Murren. He is a unicorn because he decided to save his money out of high school instead of spending it all.
We found him.
Yeah. So we found him and we brought him to you so that you could learn some of the tips and tricks that he posts on his blog, which was, what was his blog's called?
The Financial Cocktail.
One of my favorite cocktails now.
It is the favorite.
It's the usual.
It's my new the usual. Yeah, so he's been writing about finance in his blog for a while, and he's gaining a lot of traction in the healthcare community. So make sure you go take a look at the Financial Cocktail.
Enjoy the cocktail.
Welcome to the Investing RN podcast. We have a guest here, Leland Murren. Did I say that right?
You did.
Yeah?
You did.
Sounds good. We're both CRNAs, and we're both part of several different Facebook groups. And I saw a blog that he posted one time, and I read it, and I was like, oh, that's actually kind of good. And then I saw another one, and it's also really good. And so when we decided to start a podcast, Leland was actually one of the first people I thought of to get on as a guest, and he obliged. So we appreciate you being here today.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Always an honor to join.
Excellent. Well, let's get this started with give us like a background about yourself, like a brief bio. Talk about your journey into nursing. Did you always think you were going to do something in the healthcare field, or was it kind of a shift every once in a while? What brought you into nursing in general?
Absolutely. So I was kicking around careers early in high school. Decided healthcare was a pretty solid route about age 14, 15. It was kind of coming down between the medical school route and the nursing route with kind of an eye on anesthesia. And that's where I ended up going. So I ended up deciding on the anesthesia route. So went to a trauma center after a nursing degree, all of which was done in the upper Midwest state school. Went to a 550-bed trauma center after that and applied to CRNA school shortly thereafter. Went to CRNA school in the Midwest. Clinicals, multi-state, mostly South Dakota, Minnesota, and Iowa for those. And then after graduating, taking boards as a CRNA, headed down to Arizona, looking for a few things, and I found the scope of practice I was looking for. They met my criteria, and the compensation was pretty good, actually much higher than I anticipated just a couple of years ago. So really happy with my choice to head down to Arizona. And at the first of the year, my wife and I will be returning to the upper Midwest, do some local work a little closer to home.
Yeah, I say today, I had somebody ask what locums was, and I was like, it's just the equivalent of travel nursing, basically.
That's right. Travel anesthesia. That's all there is to it.
Travel anesthesia. Yeah. So you said in high school, you kind of had your eye on nursing or in healthcare. Did you know somebody that was a nurse? Like, cause I mean, I come from a family of nurses, so I was exposed to it forever. But for some families, some people, they're not even exposed to what there is out there in healthcare. There's just so many options. So what led you to nursing as opposed to something else like physical therapy or any other really aspect?
Yeah, so I grew up in a pretty construction-heavy household. I did construction for about 10 years coming out of junior high school, and working my way through college. Running a shovel essentially let me pay for my undergrad, both a big savings before I started school and then work my way through college, working summers, holiday breaks. And as far as the very few people I knew in healthcare, I had a cousin who was an emergency room nurse, ended up marrying a gal who's a flight nurse. She's pretty cool. And then I had a cousin who is a CRNA, and he does similar type practice to what I do now. Very rural, very independent, essentially an unlimited scope of practice, lots of call. Yeah, I said, you know what? Let's go down that trajectory. The job security looks fantastic. You feel like you're doing something good for the community and give back. I feel a lot of purpose in what I do now, and I did when I was in the ICU at the trauma center. Felt a lot of purpose. Worked in the CVOR, and then the medical, surgical, neuro ICU was sort of a joint. Everybody worked in all of them. We weren't segregated like some. And then we had a cardiovascular ICU that I ended up working in for about my last year there. That was my transition into anesthesia. So mostly, couple relatives and a cousin. That's about it. Otherwise, it was all construction family. So kind of going on a leap of faith, so to speak, into the healthcare realm.
That kind of speaks to Colin, I'm sure. He comes from construction.
Yeah, I didn't even have cousins that were nurses. I think I just met a guy camping one time that told me about it. And I was just like, well, yeah, 3 days a week sounds good to me. Like I'll do it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's a real leap of faith. So I respect that.
Yeah. Well, it worked out, but But yeah, I did ER nursing, so I always enjoyed it. And I thought about CRNA because obviously once I married Josh's sister, which is how we know each other, his dad is like always pushing the CRNA route. He's just like, you should do it. You should do it. So there was a time where I was considering it, but then just didn't end up doing it. But did you already know going into your nursing career that you wanted to do CRNA school? Did you like specifically go to the ICU for that purpose?
I did. I really saw a vacancy in the CRNA market specifically, and I was kind of weighing out my options at the time. And that's where, medical school was kind of up in the air, and I was looking at the number of years and then the total cost, and I'm like, man, that's a tough one. You've really got to be in it for the medicine, because the amount of student debt that those guys and gals take, it's tremendous, and really they don't make as much as you would expect for such a tough field to get into. So many limited spots. You really have to be a specialist, and again, it narrows down so much for folks to get in to those specialists. And I said, I can serve a pretty good purpose and have a much higher probability of doing something that I want to do, as opposed to getting into a residency that's not a specialty that I find desirable or interesting. I'm like, nursing, I can essentially choose where I want to go and have a lot more flexibility in that aspect. So
that was something that I found out about after I finished CRNA school completely. I didn't realize that you could go to med school, do whatever your med school, do really well in it, and then maybe not actually do what you want to do like that. After I found that out, that's kind of like terrifying. Like how can you go through that much school and that much student loans and then maybe do something that you want to do for the rest of your life?
Yeah, that'd be truly heartbreaking to make it that far and just have it not work out in your favor. And I said, you know what, I'm really not a risk taker in that regard. I said, it's not for me. I can't do it.
Even the whole match process is like kind of a trip, because I was with my buddy when he matched, and they were expecting to be in LA, and he matched in Vegas, and it was like kind of heartbreaking for him. And it was like this huge thing. And I was like, not only do you not get to choose the field you're in, but it's like, you don't even get to choose where you're going to work for the first 4 years of your career, which is just kind of insane to me. It's like being in the military.
Exactly.
So you said you're in Arizona, potentially, or not potentially. It sounds like it's already set in stone. You move into the upper Midwest again. So what currently, as a CRNA, you've been a CRNA for how long? You've been working as a CRNA?
It'd be about a year and a half.
Year and a half. Okay, great. So what would you say is the most rewarding part about the entire process, or what you see now, I guess?
Absolutely. And I may have made a very terrible mistake by signing at the location I did, because I am absolutely sold on independent practice where I can kind of run the pre-op, intra-op, post-op. I get consulted for stuff in the ICU. I get consulted for stuff in the emergency department all the time. They just let me cause trouble all over the place. Man, there is nothing better than that. I don't really punch a time clock. I show up when there's work to be done. I go home when the work is over. I get called back in for when someone needs something. The rules and regulations are really gray. And I'm like, man, what better way to serve a community? There's a population of about a little over 10,000 in the town I'm in, and about 40,000 vehicles pass through a day traveling from into Phoenix and Mesa area and out. To know that you're responsible for such a large population, if something were to happen, we're one of the only hospitals on the main route in and out. So we actually get quite a few air flights into us, being a critical access hospital. Man, is it rewarding just knowing that, you play such an impactful role in all of these different areas of the hospital. And it's going to make it difficult to go to other settings and provide anesthesia there, where I have a different role, a different scope, a different, where it's more of a team-based game. I like doing everything. It's very, very rewarding.
I know Josh, where he works, he's the only CRNA on when he's working. Is that kind of how it is where you're at too?
Yeah. So we typically run 2 operating rooms a day, and then we have a float person, or should have a float person. We've actually been running with just 2 CRNAs for the last year. So we're essentially 2 concurrently working solo CRNAs. We each take our own room. We really don't see each other till the end of the day. And then all after hours, that's all solo call, weekends solo call. So pretty close.
Very similar to what I have. So where I work, there's 2 ORs, but they run one every day. So when I'm there, It's me. That's it. And then I job share with one other guy who's been there for 45 years. So if I ever have any questions, he has the answer, no matter what it is.
Yeah, that's a great resource. Great resource.
But so that was your first job out of school. I know that's a question I see a lot is, should I take one of these type of positions right out of school, or do I need to be in a huge facility to get some more experience and that type of stuff? What do you tell people who come to you with that question?
That's a great question. And I have the same answer for the nursing lens as I do the anesthesia lens. For the nursing lens, again, it was a 550 bed trauma center. And there are a couple CRNA schools locally. So they had a very high turnover feeding CRNA schools. They'd lose about 10% of their staff annually. So there was always a massive influx of essentially new grads coming in. And that's why I went there, is because I could go directly into a trauma 1 ICU and then work into a CVOR, settling open hearts, within 9 months to a year. I don't regret doing that at all. I do think it takes the right personality to fit in. It is very stressful, especially at first. And anesthesia is the same way. I hear a lot of folks saying, oh, you need to go to med surg before you go to the ICU. Fine, works for some people. You need to go to a big ACT center where it's a team game, so to speak. There's an anesthesiologist and your CRNAs and your residents and your SRNAs, and this whole team. And they say, go to a place where you're supported. Again, I think if the personality is right and the drive is there, and you want to go rural and independent, go for it. Do it. I don't regret a minute of it. And we actually have a new grad starting at our facility, and she's about 3 weeks in. She's doing amazingly well. And I think she's going to fly. But yeah, so it can be done. It does take the right kind of person, though, for sure.
Is there anything you miss about being an ICU nurse, or are you just fully all in on the CRNA thing? Like no regrets, no looking back.
After the amount of call I take, I do kind of miss the not taking call part. Yeah. Working, like you said, working the 312s and calling it a week. That's pretty slick, man. I had a straight weekend contract. I felt pretty spoiled. Come in Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Management's already gone. It's just the weekend crew. Everybody's having a good time. That was pretty fun. Now I think I took call 230 days my first year here. So that's quite a bit of pager time for what should be a 4 CRNA shop. So that gets kind of old. Then it bogs down my weekend, but you're working all week. And yeah, carry the pager all the time does get a little old. Because like I said, our facility is busy enough where we actually get called in. My cousin works kind of one step more rural, remote, where you might get 1 call a week. It's very two OB deliveries a month type of deal, where we have quite a bit more volume than that. So that's probably the biggest thing is the call. That's the biggest difference.
That sounds like Josh's setup. That one delivery a month, right? Yeah. Or you don't even have OB, do you?
I'm the 1 step removed. Yeah. No, they stopped doing OB completely. So really? I literally get. I mean, I don't want to jinx anything.
Yeah, don't say it.
I get called maybe once a month. If they're really busy, I'll get like 1 a month.
I'm not.
There you go. For you. Just enough to keep your skills up.
That's right. Yeah.
So I heard you talking about how you worked your way and paid for your undergrad. So it sounds like you've kind of always been financially aware and savvy. But when did that kind of start for you, that you kind of started branching off into finance, or has that always been an interest of yours?
Yeah. So I was raised in a family who spoke openly about finance, among other things, raised in what would be classified as a conservative family. So we spoke money and politics, 2 things that you don't hear a lot about today without just irrational arguments. We I think had pretty, reasonable, logical discussions about those 2 and the pros and cons of all the viewpoints. And then being in healthcare now, I speak healthcare. So I really speak all of the taboo topics way too freely. It makes people very uncomfortable. But no, it was a topic that my parents openly shared when I was growing up. And that made a pretty big impact by the time I was in high school. I became a natural saver. And I think that only progressed the older I became. My parents didn't pay for my undergraduate. Again, I went to what at the time was the most affordable state 4-year university in the nation. Again, Midwest, low cost of living, makes sense. But it's still a state university, and it provided me with a really nice education. And it wasn't a hindrance at all finding a job in an ICU. So I would recommend taking an affordable route through college. A degree is a degree. Once you pass and you get licensed, well, you're licensed. You're the same as everybody else.
Yeah.
So it's all about how you apply yourself during those, clinical rotations that make the difference. And again, what kind of person you are. So I was able to work all summer, worked a lot, had a construction day job, and then topped it off with officiating softball on the weekends. So I would do that Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, and then back to doing roofing on Monday morning. So it was good. I paid for my public university on $10 an hour. So it can be done.
Yeah.
That's a very similar story to me. So when I was applying to anesthesia schools, I was just going down the list, applying to every school that had a deadline that I hadn't passed already. Yeah. I got into a school in Florida. There's a lot of schools in Florida. I'm not going to say which one, but there's a lot in Florida. And it was the one that was considered the worst. But I didn't care. I knew it was going to get me where I needed to be. And after talking to a handful of my closer friends that are CRNAs now, I actually feel that I got probably some of the better experience because I knew that it was going to be on me, whether I got a good experience or not. So Absolutely. I actually feel that I probably had one of the better training experiences going back to school. Sorry, Colin. I interrupted you, Colin. You were going to say something.
No, it's good. It's good. No, I was just going to say, like with like the kind of upbringing you had talking about money and stuff, I think for me personally, my parents always worked hard, but it was not like emphasized like, hey, you need to be planning. It was always like, yeah, you should save money, like pay things off, don't finance things, this kind of stuff. But it was like not a ton of financial awareness. So I think that kind of, not that I was in a bad position coming out of school. I had loans and stuff like that, but it was like, it took a while before I started thinking about more than just like, paying rent and like paying off your car and that kind of stuff. And I think that's kind of what made us want to do this, because I think, unfortunately, a lot of people are more like me in that sense, where it's like we didn't have that just kind of those discussions with our parents to the same extent that it sounds like you did. So, I mean, I think that's great. Now that you're being able to share that, I think is awesome. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More, it's my pleasure. Again, if I can save someone, a great deal of time and effort, kind of learn from my mistakes and just improve, man, no sense reinventing the wheel when it's already out there. Just have to, put forth a little bit of initiative to, like you said, find the right resources, whether that's, me or you guys' podcast or, Dave Ramsey or any of the, Rick Edelman, all these guys out there, they all have great programs, and they all essentially boil down to the same thing. And it's, being cognizant of your income versus expenses and living appropriately and save a little bit every month and do that for a career. And it really adds up.
Yeah. So you were blessed with a family that talked about money and talked about politics. Actually, I mean, sometimes people don't care about that, but the finances is something that everybody needs to talk about regardless.
For sure.
So why do you think it's something that's not talked about as much? Do you think if somebody has money, they're ashamed of it? Or what do you think kind of contributes to the lack of financial literacy growing up in most houses?
I think there's a lot of uncomfortability with it. I think there's a lot of bad stigmas around money. My wife, for example, her family, nothing of money was mentioned at all. She didn't have any, really no discussions until she met me, and we met in undergraduate about 10 years ago. So that was kind of I don't want to say rocked her world, so to speak. She wasn't a massive spender, but she was very average with her spending habits. The loans for undergrad weren't really a big deal. They were there. Everybody has them. It's okay. I work when I can, but I do this and that. But it wasn't until she met me and we got out of school and she had some loans because she went to an out-of-state college for a semester or two before she came back to the state university where I was at. And when we got done, I made a comment how we made $22.45 is what I started as a nurse. Made $22.45, and she had something like there was $27,000, $17,000, a couple of loans from out of state. And I said, you make way too much money to have these follow you for 10 years. Doing the 10-year agreement, just get it done with. I'm like, you make way too much money to have this be a burden. You're gonna make $45,000, $50,000 this year, man, knock them out. And then when I got kind of talking to her about being on the right side of compounding interest, right? Instead of, the student loans these days paying 6.5%, 7%. I'm like, man, you could invest that money that you no longer owe to anybody else. And you could be making 6.5%, 7% I'm like, that's way better. That's the side you want to be on. She's like, oh yeah, I guess it does make sense. We could do that. And yes, then we got really aggressive about it. But next hill was kind of covering. So she's a nurse practitioner, and now it's funding her education, and then going into anesthesia school and funding my education, which was a real bear. Nowadays, they're all about 6-figure tuition bills going into anesthesia. So pretty hefty price tag. So to manage that, I worked quite a bit in the ICU, picked up a lot of overtime, weekend contract plus overtime on usually Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and then come back for the weekend. Yeah, it was pretty quiet, even outside of college. Not a whole lot of folks were talking about their financial situations or the loans they carried. I think they just kind of assume everybody graduates with loans, everybody hangs on to them until you're 45 years old, and that's just how it is. And if more parents would start teaching their kids that, that's not how it has to be. Sure, in some instances, yeah, but I tell you what, people in healthcare, both nurses and CRNAs alike, man, the opportunity cost might be high, but compared to what you make, oh man, that's a good ratio. The odds are surely in your favor. Like I said, either way, it's a nice spot to be in.
Yeah. So kind of going back to what you're speaking on, what would you recommend to somebody who's thinking about going back to school? Because I know a big holdup is, I don't have enough money to pay for school. Mm-hmm. I took the approach as to, I'm not paying off my loans. I'm going back to school because I know the opportunity cost of once I'm finished with anesthesia school is that much better. Do you usually tell people to save up to pay for school, or to go to school because you're going to be able to pay it back so much easier once you're done?
That's a really good question. And it's tough because when you talk about going for a terminal degree, you stretch it from possibly being done with your education at 22, 23, 24 years old. Now you stretch that time frame. I was fortunate to be able to get into anesthesia school a little over 2 years in the ICU. So I finished in my late 20s, but 18 to 28, for example, that's 10 years. That's a long time to tell somebody to lock it down and really watch your spending. So I think it really depends on the person. You're absolutely right about anesthesia right now pays really, really well. And the salary versus cost of loans, I would say if you can rush it, take it. If you're looking for anesthesia school, go to anesthesia school. Don't wait. The payoff's going to be good. National average right now is about $203,000 for a W-2 CRNA. So if you count $150,000, $200,000 worth of debt, your debt is still less than 1 year of your annual income. That's a manageable feat as long as you kind of keep those expenses down for your first couple of years. But you can really hammer away on that loan, and then your shovels, give or take $200,000 a year. That's a pretty massive shovel. That's got to be 95th percentile for families, and you're pulling that by yourself. That's pretty massive. So it'd be nice to have that a couple of years earlier rather than a couple of years later. Again, if that's the route, if anesthesia is for you, and it's not for everybody. But I sure love it. And gosh, it sounds like you really don't regret your decision either. So
no, and I mean, call me lucky. I timed it right, but I from my personal experience, I tell everybody to do what I did because it worked out so good for me. But like you said, everybody has a kind of a different situation. Their goals are different, and their timing is different.
Yeah.
But I tell people not to wait. You'll be able to pay it back so much easier if you just get done with it and make that additional salary.
For sure.
So I want to bring up some of the articles that you've written. Read a few of them, and actually I've read a lot of them. But anyway, so one of them, it said 5 ways to save money. My favorite one on there was the no spend month, because you can do anything for 1 day. You can do anything for a week. You can probably do anything for 1 month. You can delay gratification for a month, but the amount of impact that has is whatever percentage that would be, like not spending any extra in 1 month. Yeah. Kind of talk about that. Like what are some other ways that you tell people to save money?
Yeah. So that was one that came off of social media. I guess it was a trend at some point in time. And I found it pretty interesting. It's kind of like a cleanse, and it resets your baseline. You kind of get in a groove about, we go out to eat this, 3 times a week, and that's just normal. That's just what we do. Or, we go to the bar and we do this. Or, we go to, a concert or a venue once a week. Cool. Well, kind of the idea behind the no spend month, it's pretty cool. You just cut your discretionary spending, live off of what you need, right? Get your groceries at the grocery store, cook your meals at home, throw a couple extra bucks towards your investments or student loan payments or whatever, saving up for your down payment on the house, the car, whatever your financial goal is, putting in a couple extra dollars that way. And it really shows you that, like you said, you can do anything for a day, a week, a month. I was really surprised at how much a guy or gal could put away if you just cut out all the excess. It's truly amazing. And then you make quite a lot of progress in just a short amount of time. You're like, ooh, I should do this again in a couple of months, kind of get caught back up, fix that urge to go out to eat or whatever, and then lock it down again. So, and I found that that's something that I was actually doing occasionally without knowing it. Now I guess they have a name for it, and they call it no spend month. So yeah, that was pretty good. And as far as everything else that my wife and I do to save money, I've been a natural saver. So it's very easy for me. It's not as easy for her. I'm to the point where emotionally it elicits a little bit of a pain response every time I make a transaction. I used to be a big cash spender for that reason. I would get all of my cash for the month from the bank in $100 bills. I'd go get $500 and I put it in envelopes. A $500 bill. I bring it home and I put one in my wallet. And then every time you buy something, you have to break that $100 bill. Man, it really hurts. And one of the most ridiculous things was they had a Little Caesars, right? I got a $5 pizza. If I walk in and the only thing I had is a $100 bill. So ordered my $5 pizza and I slide them the $100 bill and I'm like, no, we don't take hundreds. Oh, okay. So I carried at the time a hidden 50 in my wallet compartment. So I sneak in there, slide the 50 across. No, we don't take 50s. We don't take anything larger than 20s. I said, hey, I have a couple of quarters in my truck and $150 in front of you. And he goes, nah, sorry, man. Yeah, walked out, didn't get my pizza. It's just one of those things where it really makes you think about small purchases and it makes stuff harder. But it's the transactional friction that credit cards eliminate. It's the transactional friction that things like one-click checkout on Amazon eliminate, right? They make buying super easy. They did studies on vending machines where they said the ones that have the card scanners on the front, people would spend 170% more per transaction as opposed to coin and cash machines. So same machine, same location, same population, transactional friction. So that's where I recommend everything that's in your favor, right? The debt pay downs, the investing, automate as much as you can. Remove the transactional friction when it's in your favor. And as far as spending goes, create as much transactional friction so you really have to think about it. Obviously not the greatest example with the pizza, but if you have something in an Amazon cart, don't save your credit card to the web browser. Don't have one-click checkout. You have to manually enter everything in every time. And when you add in your cart, go back in a couple days later and be like, do I really need this? If yes, then continue. Go ahead, buy it. You need it. It eliminates on the impulsive stuff, and a lot of retailers really take advantage of that, transactional friction. So that'd be one thing I'd put out there that people can do. That's a pretty easy fix. Living life as normal per se. It cut my wife and I spending down quite a bit, or at least made us very cognizant of what we were buying because we're a little more invested than just mindlessly click and something's delivered to the door 2 days later. So I would recommend giving that a try to some folks. Something that a little bit different than what some of the articles online will tell you.
Yeah. I do want to ask, so you're obviously very, very strict with your financial planning. But I am curious though, like after your no spend month is over, do you find yourself just used to that and not spending much? Or are you like, oh, okay, now's my time. Like, here we go.
Good question. I actually feel pretty calm and at peace about it. I don't feel like I'm missing anything where I have to go rush out and really buy anything. And the example, I have a couple articles about, and this happens in nursing and this happens in anesthesia. And I spent more graduating as a nurse, right? So I graduated and I made two $500 purchases about 3 months after I graduated. So I had some paychecks coming in. I didn't have student loan debt. I was essentially saving for anesthesia school already. So it's not like I took loans out. But I made two $500 purchases. Those are kind of my, for me, purchases, right? Since all my spending money through high school went towards my degree, this was my time to, buy a little something for me. After anesthesia, it was about 6 months before I pulled the trigger and I bought a $600 pair of boots. And that was kind of my deal. But it'd been 6 months and I graduated debt free. So all that money was just racking up. So I never really feel like I'm missing out, whether it's from a no spend month or, kind of that new job, that upgrade, that bigger paycheck. Nah, I never really feel like I'm missing out. Material possessions don't really do it for me.
Yeah. I'm definitely, Colin knows I like to spend money a little bit. So, but my gift to myself after I graduated anesthesia school was supposed to be a Scotty Cameron putter, which I love golf. Those are very expensive. So I graduated 5 years ago and I just got that putter for me this last summer.
Hey, there you go.
So I can wait when I really, when it really hurts.
You probably felt pretty good about it, right?
I did. I felt better, but Colin knows all the other stuff I bought. So
I was going to say, don't give him too much credit. He didn't buy the Scotty Cameron putter. Instead, he bought maybe a motorhome or something.
Don't worry about it. That was a necessity.
That was a business expense. That's right. Business expense.
Yes.
Business. That's right.
Exactly.
I saw in one of your blogs mentioning something called the money moon. What's that all about?
That's this week's post. That's good. Well, I figured, since I'm the writer and editor, it's only appropriate that I make up words for my own blog.
Yeah,
because I can do that.
Absolutely.
Of course.
So it actually relates quite a bit to what we're talking about, and like a honeymoon, it's a new phase, it's an exciting time, everything's fresh, and it's a big adventure. Getting a windfall income, whether that's going from undergrad to nursing. I mean, man, I remember seeing that paycheck coming in. I'm like, whoo, this sure beats my $10 an hour roofing job holding the shovel. Man, this is sweet. And then it was kind of next level going to anesthesia, seeing that you're like, whoa, this is really good. I've been a broke graduate student for the last 3 years. This is pretty cool. They put your sign-on bonus in with the first check. So you're like, wow, this is legit. So the money moon, it's for everyone looking to manage that windfall income, right? You hear a lot about professional athletes and lottery winners, and they get this big lump sum. Obviously, it's a little more than your first paycheck working in healthcare, but the point's the same. You get this income you're not used to, and they essentially squander it. The number of professional athletes and millionaires that go broke, I mean, it's almost all of them within 5 years. I'm like, how can you make $10 million and go broke in 5 years? How can you win a $50 million lottery and go broke in 5 years? But they do it. And what the money movement's all about is having a plan before you get that kind of windfall, first paycheck, sign-on bonus, whatever. Have an idea where it's going to go, and to avoid increasing your living expenses. Take advantage of this short period, couple years. Live like a student. As much as people don't want to hear it, no one ever regrets becoming debt-free. No one ever regrets, paying off a house. All these things where, there's arguments both ways, and you could bring in the mathematical argument with the interest rates and all that stuff. But there's no time like after you're used to living like a student to continue living like a student. Undergrad, lived in an 8x10 dorm room with a roommate, and it was awesome. We had a blast. It was such a good time. We did that for 2 years and then lived in a small crappy apartment for 2 years. So guess what? When I got a job as a nurse, we lived in a even smaller crappy apartment for, it was probably 3 or 4 years because school was in the same place and I worked in the trauma center. So yeah, my current wife and I, we split a upper floor. It was 550 square feet, tandem parking in the front. And it was great. It was awesome. We were both working as nurses and had a great time, saved a ton of cash because our expenses were, we split $625 in rent. So we were in for $300 a piece. That's pretty sweet. So even if you're making $22-25 an hour, yeah, you save pretty much all that if you want to, or spend it on something more enjoyable, as opposed to going out and buying in South Dakota where we were, something like a $250,000-$300,000 house. Not uncommon for people taking a nursing position. You'd for sure be approved for that kind of house in the Midwest. But no, same with anesthesia. Like, live like a student. I lived out of a backpack for my clinical rotations. It was great. At one time, I had 4 different apartment buildings because I had rotations in different states and bouncing back and forth. But if you can kind of keep that low standard of living with your new increased paycheck, you can get some serious work done. And that's kind of what we did. The necessity on it was debatable, but to me, it's all about being aggressive early on because I'm not going to have this much time, and the whole family thing's going to start. I'm going to have different priorities, and my parents will eventually be aging, and I want to spend more time with them. And you never know what's gonna happen. So I'd rather lock it down now, put some money away, pay everything off, and enjoy it. So I'm living in a pretty similar, we upgraded in a couple areas, but it's a pretty similar cost of living to anesthesia school. Nothing too crazy.
Yeah. So you mentioned that it's common for nurses to buy a $250,000 house in South Dakota. I noticed you said that in one of your blogs is that you don't recommend a primary residence as an investment, despite potential equity growth over the years. So why do you not? I guess basically that's what I want to know. Yeah. Why do you not recommend that? I assume you recommend other things instead, and why do you choose one over the other?
That's a great question. That's actually a future blog post that I have is actually the flip side of the coin that I typically preach. And that's why a house is a good investment. But yes, I'm at this point a pretty firm believer that a primary residence isn't the most solid investment. And it's a few things. One, there's a time frame in which a house pays off. Typically, they say if you're not going to be in a house for more than 5 years, it's not a good buy. And that has to do with closing costs. So we bought a house when we moved to Arizona, and we are losing a ton of money on it. We ended up with about a $250,000 house. I think we paid somewhere like $13,000 on the front end in closing costs. And then we'll probably end up paying equal or more on the back end in closing costs 18 months later. So when they talk about the whole like going towards equity and whatnot, well, that's $26,000. That's like renting over 18 months on a $250,000 house. So we're bleeding pretty bad there. Our mortgage payment is $1,585, and that includes PMI, taxes, and insurance, which Arizona has a little bit of a state income tax, so their property taxes are about 0.6%, so about national average, nothing crazy. And of that per month, we get about $250 in equity. So that's $250 in equity. And then that would leave the other, will that be $1,000, $1,200, about $1,250 equivalent to renting. So that's going down the drain as essentially interest to somebody else. And that's the part that concerns me. And most people live in a house on average 7 to 10 years. So when it comes to all the closing costs in the front end and the back end, you lose money there. You pay a big percentage each month in interest, taxes, and insurance, and probably PMI. Private mortgage insurance. And then the rate of appreciation typically runs about 4%. Inflation runs about 3%. So the appreciation on a house does outpace inflation. I'll give it that. The real advantage is going to be the fact that you leverage with the house, that you put such a small percentage down on the house. And that's kind of the saving grace. So for a house to be an investment, you really want to be in it like 10 years. Then those, for us, the $26,000 in closing costs are going to be spread over 10 years. But for us, it's spread over 1.5 years. So that's a tough one. That's a tough pill to swallow. But in our area, we didn't have a choice. We couldn't rent. We tried really hard to rent. So the difference is you could invest that money in an index fund, which there's basically no costs. They run about 8 to 10% per year appreciation, and that's compounded. So that's kind of my other option. So people argue that you have to rent anyway. We have a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house. We don't use 2 of the 4 bedrooms, and we really don't need to use the second bathroom. So that's some other things. People typically buy more house than they need. And then seeing what our contracts were for, both my wife and I, they approved us for like literally any house in this small town. And I'm like, that's so excessive. We don't need any of that. So that would be my reason. Is 1, people typically don't live in them long enough. And 2, people buy more house than they need. Those 2 things kind of work against people. But there is a way to do it. There's a right time. If people really want to play apples to apples with the appreciation, because of how it's leveraged, right? Even if you put 20% down, you're still getting 80% of the house is leveraged, but the average down payment's about 7%. So if people are really leveraging 10 to 1. If you would put that same leverage 10 to 1 in the stock market, they won't let you do that except on trading options. But you could go a 3x weighted, S&P 500 fund. You average 30% compounded annually. So if you're, making the leverage discussion, well, then why don't you leverage your ETFs on the S&P 500? So that's kind of what the other option is. It's housing has a lot of slop, a lot of waste if you're in it for the short term, and index funds they're pretty clean. 8 to 10% is pretty cut and dried. So that's where I'm at.
So I was going to bring this up later, but since you brought up like the index funds and stuff, growing up, obviously not a lot of financial background, didn't know what to do. So when I started making money, everybody's like, oh yeah, go talk to a financial planner, go make sure they'll tell you exactly what to do. And, and so I did. And I was, they say, oh, we'll charge you 1% of what you make. And I was like, okay, that doesn't sound like very much. So why don't you tell us why that ends up being way more than they make it seem like it is?
Yeah. I had two financial advisors. So my upbringing, like we touched on earlier, that was more about being conservative, spending less than you make. That's pretty much my childhood summed up. Conservative, spend less than you make, be mindful of it. It wasn't until I actually got into anesthesia school. So I missed a lot when I was working as a nurse. I missed a ton of really cool things. And my time as a CRNA, I missed a ton of really cool things. I didn't catch them until the very end. That's when I kind of got turned on to these index funds, these low cost, passively managed index funds is what they're called. And John Bogle is the father of these, and they're actually relatively new. But anyway, they essentially they're a basket of stocks that mirror the stock market, and that's all they are. They don't trade them, they don't swap them. It's a set basket. They buy them and they let it ride. So it was really some self-study during anesthesia school, probably during COVID. Probably should have been studying, pharmacology. I was looking over index funds. Those are the heavy lifter of a portfolio that will beat a financial advisor every time. I had two financial advisors. They both charged me about 180 basis points, which is about 1.8%. So if you had your financial advisor for 1%, that was pretty cheap. That was probably a pretty good one to have with you. But they charge you that fee, that 1 or 2%, win, lose, or break even. So if the stock market's going to gain 8%, they've got to make your account grow 10% because they're going to siphon that 2% off the top. And statistically, they don't beat the market. They don't even match the market, which I find baffling. How can you get rooms full of people who have degrees in finance and economics and stock trading, and they can't match the market? So you could self-manage better and not have the fees associated with it. So that's where I really let both of my financial advisors go, is because of the fees, and they didn't produce the results, is what it boiled down to, which is why I don't advise financial advisors. A little bit of self-study will save you a ton of money because that's all compounded. So it's not just that flat fee like you were talking about. It's, like I said, over time, the compounded fees make a difference. And on my accounts that they had managed, it would have been like a $400,000 difference over the course of like 30 years is what they would have essentially siphoned off of my gains. I'm like, whoa, I could give it a shot for that, Yeah. So that's where it came down to. Now, if you're talking, business structure, inheritances, or things like that, yeah, then I think some professionals are really good. I think a tax advisor is going to be a really strong option. But as far as financial advisors, if your portfolio's, less than 8 figures, you can probably work your way through it. You'll be okay.
Yeah. And I didn't even notice that it was probably not a great idea, because they always promise, like, we only make money if you make money. We'll take 1% of what you make. But when COVID happened, the market crashed, went down like, I don't know how much it was, 30% or something. The month of May or March, whatever month went down the most, I still saw their fee come out of my account. And that's when I started asking some more questions. And since then I found a fee only, which was okay, but now I'm just kind of doing it all on my own.
Yeah. And, and if people want to have, some of it managed by a professional and some of it, self-managed, cool. That's great. They typically charge more if you have a smaller portfolio. Think about, 1% of $10,000 or 1% of $10 million, a $10 million account, they're going to charge you, just a little bit. If you only have $1,000 invested with them, they can't just charge you 1% and really, pay the bills. So
right.
They're going to charge you a little more. So that'd be the only thing I caution if you're going to, self-manage some, and they're good to talk to nevertheless, but there's resources out there if you're interested, and I'm always happy to bounce ideas off people if they have questions. That's what I did to other people. I bounced ideas off, and people helped me along the way. I definitely didn't reinvent the wheel. I, kind of like school, right? You take notes, and then you get a big old notebook of information and wealth of knowledge at the end. And man, I'm just putting that all on a blog now. I didn't really make any of it. I just reading off my notes, putting it in blog form, and trying to make a story out of it.
So me and Colin, we started buying real estate a few years ago. So that's kind of that's where most of our focus is, real estate investing. We've grown our portfolio to what I would like to think is a pretty decent size. But what are you doing for like preparing yourself for the future? Are you just saving and putting it all in the stock market, or what are your plans moving forward?
Good question. So again, kind of a unique situation. Came out of school. I don't have any student loan debts. Wife doesn't have any student loan debts. The only debt we have is a mortgage, and that was kind of by choice. Interest rate was kind of borderline as far as, do we pay it off? Do we hold it? It's about 5%. So I started putting some money in the market. That's what I did. I had a pretty lofty savings goal. We have a pretty high savings rate. Basically just funneled it in there. Lately, it's been going into a money market account with some of the uncertainties, which I realize you're not supposed to do. You're supposed to consistently invest it in the market, but I did peel that back just a little bit, my own way to gamble a little bit and play. But it's still in a money market account getting, I think about 5.3%. So it's not a total loss, but yeah, I fill my 401k every year. Health savings account, always a good option. The nursing route, and for the students out there, the Roth accounts, Roth IRAs, great option. Put $6,500 in one of those. That's all post-tax dollars. That's pretty sweet. CRNAs, you guys have to do backdoor Roth. But yeah, that stuff's all tax advantage. I mean, who doesn't like saving a little bit on taxes? But no, otherwise, I would love to do the real estate thing. As far as buying houses, man, that's the way to do it. That's really good. So yeah, houses as a personal residence, I could go either way on. Real estate investment, yeah, you run the numbers. That's solid. So that's awesome that you guys are doing that.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. And you mentioned the blog earlier. So that's the finance cocktail. Is that right?
Yeah, it ended up being the financialcocktail.com.
Yeah. Cool. So how long has that been going on? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's actually been going on right about a year. I think I got an email saying they're going to re-up my subscription. So right about a year. And it like I said, it's basically a compilation of my notes, things that people told me to help me on my journey. And I said, man, I need to put this out there, because after talking to both nurses and CRNAs, my classmates, and even practicing CRNAs, there's just not a lot of financial education out there for healthcare professionals. We spend so much time studying medicine and not really any time on how to manage our money, how to manage the debt we accrue going through training. And I think that's a real misstep. And whose responsibility it is, I don't know. Is it the family? Is it the school system? Is it the college? Is it self-study? I don't know. You just hope you catch it somewhere. So that's where my focus is really. You hear a lot of talk out there about the fancy investment strategies and this and that, and I really just try to bring it back down to step one, right? Let's take on the basics first about, you've got this money coming in. What are we going to do with it? Not, how can I milk my return from, 10% to beat the market and get 13% per year? So, yeah. If you save $1,000 per year, your return going from 10 to 13%, it's not really going to do you anything. If you save, $5,000 per year, save 5 times that, then take the 10%. You're way ahead by saving a couple more bucks. And that's the part most people really lack, is that initial phase. I have a blog on it, the accumulation phase, and it speaks to making the most of the income and not worrying so much about the investments or the annualized return or the compounded interest just yet. Focus on, saving a decent chunk and paying down your debt and getting it started and having your income being the big lifter. And then when you're, 60 years old, then it's the time to make sure that your portfolio is producing. That's going to be your heavy lifter. Your ability to work is going to decrease. Your income is going to decrease. So that's when you need that portfolio to be fully kicking. And it's somewhere in your 30s, 40s, and 50s where, your contributions to your accounts will go down, right? You'll have family, you'll have kids, you'll have houses, maybe you'll have a vacation home, buy a Sunday car, whatever, right? Your expenses will go up. So you won't be able to save so much, but hopefully you put enough in that portfolio early on where now the interest on that, or, the dividends off of your real estate portfolio, it's a little bit of cash flow, a little bit of equity in those houses, maybe that 401k is growing, you kind of reach where they're both paying a substantial amount, something you can live off of and hopefully retire. And
Yeah.
Retiring doesn't necessarily mean 65. Retiring means when your portfolio or your cash flow can support your cost of living. That's retiring. That's the real deal. And that's the other thing that I wish someone would have told me earlier is it's all about ratios. It's not age 65. You don't walk away at age 65. By the time I get there, it'll probably be 75 when you can start collecting Social Security, if that's still around. Now, try and make it a ratio.
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard of Alex Ramosi, but that was he was the first guy that introduced me. I mean, it's a little embarrassing that he was the first guy that introduced me to this, but wealth as a ratio.
Yeah.
He said people that make substantially less money are way wealthier than people that have a much higher income. And
For sure.
It's a pivot. It makes me think about things a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But
and that's
all right, so we're gonna move on to our what we call our final four, same four questions that we ask everybody. And we're going to start with what's a top financial resource that you found for nurses or CRNAs, whether it's a book or a podcast or any financial resource.
Top financial resource. I mean, it's a little biased of me to pick my own blog, so I won't. There's a guy out there named Rick Edelman. Okay. He's similar to what some of the Dave Ramsey concepts are, with a little more of a mathematical approach. He's a solid one, a little bit older now. Newer generation is going towards J.L. Collins' book, Simple Path to Wealth. That's a good one that I hear tossed around the CRNA community. So I'll go a little old school, little new school. Great resource for everyone. They should read those in high school. Great books.
Nice.
Great answer. Now what's your blog post one more time? Go ahead and plug it.
Yeah, we're at the financialcocktail.com blog post. They come out on Tuesday, usually.
No shame in plugging that. That's the best financial resource.
that is the actual top financial resource.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you had things pretty well dialed in when you came out of nursing school, but what was there anything that you would change or anything you would tell yourself now, tell your new grad self?
Yeah. I would have done a Roth IRA earlier. That applies to high schoolers, that applies to undergrads, nurses, SRNAs, Roth IRA, $6,500 a year. Don't miss it. Every year, big money in the long run. Put it in a passively managed index fund. Don't touch it. It's all after-tax dollars, so you take all those gains tax-free. You can pull them after 5 years. Don't even think about it. Ride it out till retirement. And that's the account you use if you retire early and don't have access to a 401k yet, because those withdrawals are 59.5, which again, by the time I get there, it'll probably be 70. So the Roth IRA grows tax-free, contribute every year, $6,500, I think is the current, and you can start early. So definitely, even if you can't put all $6,500 in there, put a little something in there. Got to balance it out with paying off the loans, paying for school, all that good stuff. But yeah, definitely would have helped to know that.
And buy real estate with it.
Yeah, you can buy real estate with it. Real estate's a great investment, especially if something tips with the crazy market right now. Yeah, the real estate market might be hot.
Well, but you can buy it with your Roth IRA as well.
Yeah, very flexible. I think you can use a Roth IRA and maybe even an HSA. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, they'll let you pull from a couple of different accounts to go for real estate. That's a really slick way to do it. Yeah.
All right, number 3, what is your biggest goal for the next 12 months and how can we help you get there?
Biggest goal for the next 12 months. I would have to say it's going to be a financial goal and a savings rate. I'm going to try and pop a savings rate about 80%. Bold move. That's going to be 80% net.
80%.
80% net. And because we'll be going full-time locums, we'll get a housing stipend. So that's my goal. And that's about where we're running now. We're close. But we'll lose the housing payment, and we'll have our Airbnb comp. We'll be traveling with a dog and a newborn, so that'll be exciting.
Oh,
so
congratulations!
Yeah, thank you. So the hotels really don't fit, so we kind of negotiated in the contract that we get kind of a flat stipend. And we'll use it for an Airbnb.
I'll go ahead and let you know right now, we will not be able to help you with that. Is there something that we can help you out with?
Yeah, no, I'm always looking for actually the rental real estate. That's something that Arizona was going to be a short-term play, a couple of years for us. Going back to the Midwest, that's the content I'm researching right now, is a lot of that, because I'll be in a I didn't really like the idea of renting out our house from afar. It's a little much for me. It'd be 1,500 miles. Something goes wrong, I'd like to be at least a little bit closer. Yeah, the rental real estate, that'll give me a little bit of diversification in the portfolio. Those nice tangible assets, to kind of complement the stock stuff is really what I'm going for. And how guys are running the numbers, where they're finding the deals, whether it's the single families, the duplex, or whether they're going commercial, units greater than 5, if they're partnering up with other people. Are they going more in the syndicate, the big group stuff? Yeah, that's really where my interest is turned. So if you guys are finding a niche market, man, that's
absolutely happy to chat for sure.
Before we get to number 4, it sounds like you're going to be eating a lot of Little Caesars next year. So you better break those $100 bills down into 5.
Yeah.
Number 4 is if you were to tell people, so with us being the investing RN for registered nurse, but also for right now, what would be the one thing that people can do right now that would make a difference in their life financially for nurses specifically, CRNAs, nurses?
Absolutely. There's one stream where I think the money should go. One is going to be high interest debt, and I classify that as debt over 5%. That's really expensive to be borrowing money. And if that gets accomplished, then I think the key is to invest early and consistently. That's it. I really think that's the ticket. I think it's very much overlooked. It's very basic, simple advice, but it works. I hate to say it, it's simple, but it works. Yeah, consistent every month. Get in the habit, put some money away or pay something off every month, and make it a priority. Is if you can clean up your personal financial house early in life, 20s, 30s, that growth is going to be massive on the back end, and you'll have a pretty nice, comfortable life.
So one bonus question just for you, because to make you seem a little more relatable to everybody that can't just pay for college from working shovels and whatever else and can't save 80%. What would you say is like the biggest financial mistake you've made, and what'd you learn from it?
Oh, that's easy. That's my biggest mistake is how I got through college. Man, I work too much. It's a big problem. It inhibits a lot outside. I don't have a great work-life balance. Biggest hindrance, So when people look and they're like, "Oh my gosh, what a savings rate draw. He's able to put away this much, that much." I'm like, man, you don't want to know how I got here. And you don't want to do the same thing. You got to have a little bit of balance. So I mention that once in a while on the blog, like, this is what I did, but I'm not necessarily recommending it. I'm just telling you what I did. Yeah, I missed a lot. I was working about 80 to 100 hours a week, both in high school and through college in the summers. I didn't usually work during the school year, but yeah, that'd be my biggest regret is working too much. Yeah, it's nice now, but I still work too much. Yeah.
Well, like Josh's dad says, if you love your job, you don't work a day in your life, right? Is that how it goes?
Yeah. That's kind of how I feel. I enjoy Mondays. I enjoy showing up to work. Yeah. I actually don't mind getting called in, but it's a real hindrance, especially taking call. Man, you can't leave town, can't do anything.
I used to take so much extra call. I mean, there was one summer I probably took like 5 out of 7 nights the entire summer, and that was just way too much. Mm-hmm. I realized it. I take less call now. I still take call, but I take less now. Yeah. Anyway, so where can people find you aside from your blog? Do you have any other socials where people can kind of follow your journey and see what you're up to?
Yeah, I'm working on a Facebook page. We'll see where the social media stuff advances from there. But yeah, right now it's mostly just that. Looking to get a little Facebook page up, something. But yeah, otherwise I have a contact link on the blog. Someone has questions, they can reach out, or if they have ideas, I'm always open to ideas. Yeah, mistakes on the blog, ideas. I do financial coaching, so if someone wants me to lay eyes on their finances, I do that. Always open to suggestions.
Sounds good. And they can find all that through your blog. You have links on there?
Yep, it's all on the blog. There's a contact us page. And reach out.
Great. All right, everybody, go check them out.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and take some notes on this one.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks again for the last hour. We're mind blown. And we're all going to go change our savings rate to 80%.
Yeah, good luck.
1%. No, just kidding.
All right, well, thanks.
All right, well, I appreciate it, Leland. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Appreciate it, Bills.